Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Cloudcast. My name's Tyler Bower. I have with me my esteemed colleague, Seth. Say something funny, Seth.
Hello, Tyler.
It's never funny.
Tyler was pretty funny. You missed the joke there.
We have with us Will Ominsky. Did I say that correctly?
You did. You got it perfect.
All right, look at me. I'm winning. Well, Will, tell us your origin story, as we always start these episodes off with. Tell us how you got into AVD expertise and king of AVD, as they call you, right? I'm sure all over Nerdio.
All the time.
Yeah.
Could somebody first tell me what AVD even is?
Yeah. Azure Virtual Desktop. It's actually had many names throughout the years, but it's Microsoft's one of its newest virtual desktop or VDI solutions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So before we even got into AVD, tell us how you got into this. Tell us your origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, today, right, I lead Nerdio's global MSP sales channel. I'm vice president of sales here at Nerdio, but I like to think I have an interesting story. Maybe not everybody thinks it's interesting. Certainly my wife and kids have heard it way too many times, and they just kind of roll their eyes. But for about 3 years, I was selling copiers and printers. That's kind of one of the ways I got
No
into
way.
sales.
That's what Tyler did.
No way.
Tyler did.
Dude, we're printing bros?
Yeah, there we go. Konica Minolta. So I was, selling Konica Minolta, the Biz Hub. I remember when the color, Biz Hub came out. It was like, the new jam, and a lot of.
They called me the toner czar. I was the toner czar. Yeah.
Nobody called him that.
Never. No.
Well, and I thought I was pretty good. I was out there selling copiers. I was doing it for 3 years. A lot of people don't make it. It's kind of a very difficult industry, kind of cutthroat. And, again, I could demo that thing like nobody's business. Here's where the toner goes, and look we do 32 pages per minute, and
Oh, you actually gave demos of the copier? Oh, I gotta see this. I gotta see.
So,
You got some of that on video for us to watch later,
I
Will?
probably do in the archives, right? And eventually I got to this point where I was like, I really don't like selling this hardware stuff. Not really. I've kind of hit my cap, and I really like technology though. And so what did I do back then? I started replying to job ads on Craigslist. And that is how I landed my first job at an MSP. I had no idea what an MSP was, except they did something with technology. And the guy who hired me actually had worked at Xerox before, so that's kind of how we jammed and kind of connected on that level, and brought me on. And then I ended up at this amazing MSP in New England. And back then they were doing things that a lot of MSPs even right now are trying to implement or have not fully implemented. 100% flat rate service, unlimited support. They had specific SKUs, ways that they delivered each of those SKUs that they did. And we grew that company over about 5 years or so from when I joined as a salesperson. We ended up selling it to Staples, the office supply company, believe it or not. And I stayed on for a few years after the acquisition, and then said, you know what, I had an opportunity to kind of move to the other side of the channel, right? I did a lot of cloud sales there. I did voice over IP and things like that, and I ended up at a company that many MSPs are probably familiar with called Independence IT, who later got purchased by CloudJumper and then by NetApp. So I built the Independence IT MSP channel. And that's really how I got really focused on virtual desktops, terminal services at the time. I've worked at a few different startups ever since then, but really focusing on working with MSPs, cloud computing, backup, disaster recovery, virtual desktops. And at one point, I decided I kind of want to start my own business. So I did that. I was doing peer groups for MSPs. I realized fairly quickly I don't want to run my own business. And so sold off some of the assets, worked with some friends afterwards at a private data center called US Signal, who I know a lot of MSPs use. And they were going to build out a VDI offering, never really came to fruition. I had this great manager at the time who ran into one of the co-founders of Nerdio at an event saying, hey, I got this guy, Will. He's pretty awesome. I don't know how happy he is here. and you guys should maybe talk. And so that's how I got introduced to Nerdio, and the rest is history. Six years later, here I am, leading the MSP sales team, and loving every minute. Continuing to talk about virtual desktops and Microsoft technologies.
This guy Will, he's a pretty big deal. You know what I mean? It's kind of a big deal. Nice. Well, that's so cool. So tell me what Nerdio does. What does Nerdio do?
Yeah, so today we support MSPs in, I would say, maybe filling the gaps in terms of Microsoft technologies and making them accessible, easy, and profitable for managed service providers to deliver at scale. Right? One of the things with the native Microsoft tools, like Microsoft's great. It's super flexible. They have amazing technologies that you can use, but a lot of times not approachable. There's no map for MSPs. Everything's kind of do it in a silo for customer A, customer B, customer C. And what Nerdio does is we bring it and make it accessible to the MSP where you can set up standards and then click a button and apply them to every single customer, right? You don't have to do everything in a silo. We make these complicated technologies and tasks that you normally would need a tier 3 engineer for, and we make it so your tier 1 tech, regardless of their background or skill set, can just press a simple button and do it. And today we support the most common Microsoft technologies that MSPs use: virtual desktops, which is AVD, and Windows 365 or cloud PCs, a little bit newer flavor of an AVD, as well as, I would say, the broad M365 stack. Things like Intune and Autopilot and Defender, all those things that you get with your business premium license.
Very cool. So sticking with the last one, Office 365, right? In my opinion, in working with customers, sorry, you hear dogs barking, apologies, but you hear a lot about, we're using E5 licenses or we're using E3 licenses, and most companies that I'm talking to are really unaware that they're underutilizing the tool or subscription they already have and what it's capable of. Are you seeing the same thing in the marketplace right now?
All day long, every day. And it's not just customers, right? It's MSPs as well. A lot of times we buy the business premium or E3 or E5 license because that's what our customers are asking for. That's what they had when I started working with them. Or I know kind of that business premium gives me the most value for the dollar when you kind of look at the SKU. But so often what we see is we're using it for email, we're using it for the productivity apps, and we're leaving so much on the table. And listen, I get it, right? We're an MSP. We've grown up with these very specific MSP tools. There's millions of them. You go to an MSP event. I was just at PAX 8 Beyond, for example. There's like 100 vendors out there with all of these kind of point solutions. And a lot of times we don't take a step back and say, well, wait a second, what is everything that's included in that business premium E3 or E5 license? And there's this Microsoft employee actually in Australia who created this website that I know some MSPs are familiar with, M365maps.com. You can go there and you can look at every single feature you get with each of the licenses. They keep it up to date. And if you go to the business premium one, there's like almost 100 features you get with business premium. Most MSPs are using 10. And so that's kind of our message to the world is if you're already paying for this license and you're only using 10 out of 50, 75, or 100 features, you're probably leaving money on the table, because what you've done as an MSP is you've gone to an event, you've met some really cool vendor, you've bought their solution, you're paying 50 cents, $1, $5 an agent or a user for that product, but you already have that feature in your 365, and you're not using it because you don't know how to. There's no multi-tenant approach to it, and that's where Nerdio can bridge that gap.
What are you seeing around Copilot? What are you guys doing there? I mean, that's obviously a very hot button right now. So
it's a huge hot button, but nobody knows how to monetize it. It's like everybody's talking about it, but like, why do I care? My customers are asking about it, but then when I dig into it and I ask them the why, they're like, well, I don't know. Everybody's talking about it. Well, it's like, what problem are you trying to solve? Right? Like, we even had this conversation internally at Nerdio. We're like, we should probably be using Copilot at Nerdio. We're a very Microsoft-aligned company, but it's like, what problem are we trying to solve? So we rolled out a small use case. Like, go go use Copilot. I challenge, these 15 employees to just use it every single day for an hour and let's see what happens. And we came up with some interesting results, right? I can summarize emails. When I'm running into a meeting last minute, I can quickly have it create a PowerPoint off of some notes. I can have it summarize, past things, and then can we quantify a little bit the time savings? I think that's kind of like table stakes with Copilot. Being able to get data when you're doing planning, those types of things. But I think a lot of people, are just fitting it in because they feel like they have to, instead of saying and taking a step back and saying, what are those annoying things my employees spend time on? What are those things that we complain about and have complained about over years? And, what AI solutions maybe are out there that can solve it? And maybe it's not, M365 Copilot, maybe it's Copilot Studio, or many of the other Copilots that are out there, or even a non-Microsoft based AI. I think those are the questions we really need to be asking, because that's where MSPs can monetize it. That's where you can solve true business challenge. Yeah.
Well, what are the most underutilized and highest value capabilities that you actually get in that stack that most people don't know about?
Yeah, so I think maybe the number one is all the security features, things like Defender, for example. Like almost everybody has Defender. It's part of Business Premium, and that's what most people are using, I would say, in an SMB environment, or MSPs are trying to standard on. But then you go and look and you see MSPs have 3 to 10 different security products in their stack. Now, what I'm not advocating for is to go rip out all of these amazing, security products, but you're paying for it. We all know you need multiple security products because it's that onion, right? It's a multi-layered approach. So why not turn it on? We see MSPs and are coaching them, even if you're scared, turn on Defender in passive mode. Let it get telemetry and data and show you maybe where you have your gaps. And then what we see is you get a level of comfort with it that actually it's a pretty good product. Now, I know people roll their eyes when you say, go look at Gartner, right? And things like that. But Gartner, like, they rank these things, and lots of companies do. And Defender's like at the very, very top. It's a really good security product. And then sometimes MSPs that are further down their evolution, we are seeing them remove other third-party security products and not pay that dollar or whatever it is per user per month. Now you've just, become more profitable, right? Instantly, without having to go raise prices to your customers, because, you have this license that's included, or maybe you don't, right? Maybe you keep paying for it and you have this level of security. Things where you can look at, privacy data that's contained in emails. Where is your data going? Where is it getting out? There are those types of features that are included, or even just simple things like locking down applications from mobile devices or non-company devices. Like, these are things that MSPs talk about and they want to do, but generally we don't see them enabling this and implementing it at scale across all of their customers because it's too hard, right? And I think that's an area where, whether you use Nerdio or not, right, MSPs, you have this business premium license, you should be using it and spending time investigating versus going and buying other products off the shelf.
What about Microsoft Fabric? What are you guys doing there?
We really don't do a lot in terms of Microsoft Fabric. We see a lot on the networking side, right? A lot of times it's like, hey, we're going to bring traditional networking, VNets, subnets, DNS, all of those types of things into the cloud when we talk about infrastructure. But there's also this shift. Right? More and more MSPs are saying, well, I don't need infrastructure anymore. I can use Entra ID, right? I can use that for my identity. So many applications are SaaS-based. People are just going to, Intune join maybe my laptop, and everything else is going to be SaaS-based. Now, I would challenge MSPs with that approach a little bit. The second you start allowing software vendors to deliver SaaS-based applications to your customers, you now have less to manage, and you can actually erode your margins and your revenue, because you used to charge $300 a month per server. Now you don't have any more servers in there, so you're bringing in less money. A technology like virtual desktops, for example, allow you as the MSP to deliver those applications to your MSP much the same way this SaaS vendor would deliver QuickBooks, online. And I know Intuit's trying to get away from all of that stuff. Maybe not the best example, but you can actually do this and maintain control, maintain revenues. And when your customer calls in screaming that QuickBooks is down or whatever the application is, you don't have to say, well, I called Intuit and I'm waiting on them. Your customer's upset, right? That can hurt your relationship with them. Yeah, it's nice to blame somebody else to an extent, but it also can hurt trust, even though it's not your fault and you have no control over it.
Interesting. Interesting. So in that token of, less infrastructure, more productivity, right? We were talking a little bit about AVD. There's Windows 365, right? Like, there's a lot out there around just working, right? And virtualization. There's PC as a service that's happening. I'm seeing, mobility providers getting into certain aspects with 5G and other things. So, what is Nerdio doing? What are you seeing in the market? What are MSPs asking for?
Yeah, so the approach that we've taken at Nerdio is really to be flexible and very broad. So we want to not force an MSP to doing things a certain way because that's what Nerdio can support. So we really support all of that, right? Whether you want to build it with Azure Virtual Desktop or you want to buy it with a technology like Windows 365 Cloud PC. I almost look at the differences between those as a build it like customized, highly customizable is Azure Virtual Desktop. You take this massive bucket of Legos and you can put all your little bricks together and build this customized virtual desktop offering for each individual customer that you want versus more of a traditional DaaS offering, right? Which is Windows 365. That's like, hey, Microsoft, I'm going to pay you $50 a user a month. You're going to give me absolutely everything I need. I don't need to worry about the instructions and all the different color Lego blocks and sizes. Just give it to me. I just want to consume it and not worry about the health and feeding of this because I'd rather just go out there and sell than worry about all the back end, maintenance tasks that I have to do. And that's what I love about Microsoft again. It gives you these options and these flexibility. It can be a little daunting if you're new to it because it's like, where do I start? They're very similar. They're both virtual desktop options. But I think Nerdio has done a pretty good job in terms of saying, hey, tell us what you want, Mr. and Mrs. MSP. Tell us what your goals are, right? And we'll tell you and help guide you towards the technologies that make the most sense. And it's not always a one size fits all, right? We see, some executives, you might give them a Windows 365, that pre-built DaaS offering. Your kind of worker bees, right? You might give them an AVD because you can drive costs down significantly because they're not in their desktop 8 hours a day, right? They're on mobile, they're out on the road traveling. We see this with like home healthcare and things like that. They're driving from house to house, those types of things. It gives you that flexibility, and that's where I say too. Nerdio is much more than a software company. I think we built a team and programs of some really amazing people that can kind of be like your Sherpa maybe. You don't just go climb Everest. What do? You go plan and you hire a Sherpa and they're like, hey, put your oxygen mask on. We're at this elevation. Like, that's where Nerdio is. We're kind of guiding you, making sure you go down that path and you don't fall off the side of the mountain. And then you can end up with the margins that you want, with the health of your customers that you want, that high end user experience without making sacrifices in other places.
Is it weird that I need the oxygen mask at the base of the mountain? Is that weird?
Tyler needs it going
Not
up
at
his
all.
stairs. He needs the oxygen mask.
Gosh.
Hey,
It's like,
Will, if you were, I know we're focused on MSPs, but if you were an end customer and you're talking to your MSP, like what questions should you ask your MSP to make sure you're getting the most out of the stack that you are paying for?
yeah, I think it's a great question. I think we're seeing actually more of this, right? And going back to the AI thing real quick, AI is bringing information to people's fingertips. I think back around like when Google was really starting to get bigger, like we'd see different questions in sales processes. We're seeing it even more now, and so I think it's important for MSPs to be educated on this. And I think customers can go to AI and even ask this, what should I be asking?
Right, right.
Right? But I think end customers should be asking, what are you doing for me in terms of security? What are features that I'm already paying for in Business Premium that I'm not using that could help me? Right? And I think customers shouldn't just ask those questions. They should be very forthcoming about the challenges that they're facing. Right? I constantly have this Monday morning meeting. Everybody tries to log in, and I can't get started till 5 minutes after the start time because people have issues with Teams or Zoom or their laptops. Right? That's a real challenge that takes 50 people or however many people at the company an extra 5 minutes. If you can save me 5 minutes every single day with these repetitive tasks that take too long, my application loads slowly, right? I'm worried about data moving off site. I notice this employees like tossing their laptop in their backpack, and then they're up in the woods or traveling on trains on their Instagram, right? Like, what happens if they leave that laptop there? What are you doing to secure my company data? I think those are the types of questions they should be asking. I also think, you know, customers should be asking, where is technology going? Not just about the problems today, right? But what are you looking forward to? Where am I going to need to make changes? Like there's Windows 10 end of life, right? Once that's done, well, tell me more about Windows 11 end of life. And I know that's not a conversation anybody's really having today, but what are the next things? What are you seeing other people use AI as an advantage for? Because I feel like I should be doing this AI thing, but I don't know anything about it, right? And I don't know, I've heard of Copilot, I've heard of Chat GPT, but are there other AI tools out there? Because there's millions of them.
100%. And do you feel that the market is prepared for September, October? I mean, are you seeing the shift towards AVD, Windows 365? I mean, I can tell you that we're seeing a lot of interest, but not as much action as I would think.
Yeah, so I think you phrased it actually really well. We're seeing lots of conversations, lots of interest. Some people are being very, very proactive about it, and we are seeing changes happen to support that. But I think in a lot of ways, a lot of us support SMBs, sub 500, sub 3,000 user organizations, and a lot of times, like, they're running lean, and so it's not a problem until it's a problem, and that date comes and passes, and then that date comes and passes, and we're like, oh, nothing catastrophic happened. I have a little bit more time, and I think a lot of times people just wait until there's an emergency, and sometimes you end up paying a lot more for it in the end, and say we shouldn't do it again. But there's always this whirlwind of the business going on. Like, well, I could tell you how important it is to move off Windows 10 because the end of life is coming. But you know what? That doesn't keep the lights on when we're trying to hit sales numbers or get this project out the door or something like that for our customers. And I think sometimes those things take priority. So I think it's important for us to continue having those conversations with customers. I think it's important for customers to think about that and then evaluate their level of risk by not making this decision. It's the same thing, that we see with things like backup and DR, implementing, employee security education and learning tracks and those types of things. Like, there is a cost benefit that we also have to be realistic about.
Do you feel, though, that because we work heavily within the SMB world, I do feel that while maybe it's not shifting towards, AVD, Windows 365 at the masses, but I will say that risk versus cost is the soft cost realization is becoming very front and center for a lot of SMBs due to security, due to compliance, due to things out of their palms, right? Their grip, Windows 10 end of life. Like, are you seeing that as well? I'm starting to see like the realization of soft costs more so in the SMB now than ever.
100%. But I also think part of it is, we talked about before, buyers and end customers are more educated. They're getting hit with news all the time, right? Like, I wake up every morning and I have 25 different things in my inbox that I subscribe to, that are relevant to me and my industry. And it's like, this hack happened, this customer was fine, this one went down, there's this new threat, your passwords were exposed, all of this stuff. And I think that is exposing people to that risk more so than ever, right? They've heard of somebody having that. And I also think, we are getting better as technology leaders in being able to more concretely articulate what those costs are. In the past it was like, yeah, there's risk. Now it's like, no. This happened to this customer. They were down for 5 days. They are a law firm. They bill at $500 an hour. These, times this many hours they were down and lost this much money. We're getting better at quantifying those costs. Where before, if you're not quantifying it, it's a lot of selling on fear without anything measurable, and that's never a good thing in my opinion, right? When you can measure it and it's like, listen, I'm trying to help you. And if you don't want to, that's okay. You can take that risk. I might need you to sign this thing saying you're accepting this risk, because don't come around, in six
Yeah.
months when something bad happened. But I think we are seeing that, and I think it's good for the industry to be able to weigh that cost benefit, that risk conversation. And as long as you're educated and going into, we all take calculated risks. Right? I went out in my Harley the other day and I didn't wear a leather jacket because it was 100 and something degrees out. That was a calculated risk, right? If I go down, I'm going to have road rash all over my arm. But, those are the things that we do every single day as humans.
Hey, Will, one of the things that came up in one of our previous podcasts, we had Adam Kahn at Barracuda, and he was talking about all the things that all the tools that the bad guys who were actually trying to get to your networks and create, chaos have. And AI, I think, is one of those things. If the bad guys are using AI too. It's not just on the good guys. So if you're not taking advantage of the tools that are out there today that are fighting, the threats that we have, then guess what? The bad guys have better tools than you do.
There is a high schooler sitting in, their parents' basement right now that's never coded before, going to some AI tool, figuring out how to steal money or make money or build some app. I thought it was very insightful at the PAX 8 Beyond event a couple weeks ago. The one of the keynotes where it said AI is kind of allowing SMBs or even individuals to lower the gap between an enterprise or a very large organization with lots of sophistication. And I think that comes across all fronts, right? It creates massive opportunity for SMBs to punch significantly above their weight or where they have in the past, but it's also, a very scary thing because, you don't have to have coding experience. You can ask an AI, a free AI, what AI tools can I use to code? Go get that AI tool. Ask it to code something. You get an error and you're like, I have this error, fix it. And before you know it, you've built something. And so the world is changing faster than ever in terms of technology. And it's very important, I think, for people that play in the space to help educate as well as just stay on top of this type of stuff. But it's an amazing opportunity as well for those that want to embrace it.
Absolutely.
Do you think that overall adoption of these tools, like we all know how impactful they could be, like even prioritizing sometimes the maximizing the tools that we own, right, becomes something that goes to the wayside. Like, what are some of the factors? Like, do you think some of the world events that are happening around tariffs and supply chain and how all of those challenges are happening above kind of the tech stack, do you think those are impacting priorities right now? Or it seems like it's not, for a lot of companies, it's not something laser focused. And what we're describing and the experts that I talk to, it's like game changing. It has to be game changing for so many businesses, but nobody seems to really be prioritizing it. Well, shouldn't say nobody. Most people I talk to, right?
But think about it, it's so hard to prioritize. You have so many things coming at you every single day. I know it's like probably super controversial and stuff to talk about. It's been in the news a lot, but look at the tariffs. Like it changes every single day, or was changing almost every single day. It's that uncertainty, I think, makes it very hard for people to prioritize, right? And so I think what happens in those cases, people just push things off. Like, I can't plan, I can't make decisions, because if I make a decision today, the factors that led to that decision might be completely different tomorrow. So I think it's very, very difficult. I think that is influencing. I think we're also at this like interesting spot. We think about uncertainty in the past. We had COVID. We had the pandemic. That was amazing for so many MSPs, right? Sure, there were companies going out of business and things that were negatively impacted, but I would say generally the MSP market and many customers were able to capitalize on that. They became more agile. They used technology. We saw massive cloud adoption happening there. I think because of the way that things are right now, all this information coming at you, some economic uncertainty, things like that. It's a little bit different, and it's making it very hard for people to prioritize. I obviously, in my scope, focus on Microsoft and helping MSPs and small to medium-sized businesses with this. But I think you said something really important there, Tyler, where it's like, you already have other tools. It might not just be Microsoft 365. You have an RMM tool, a security tool. If you look at the average amount of features that a customer implements in a software tool, it's somewhere around like 23, 28%. right? So people should be looking at this across the board. Do I need this tool? Is it really worth it for 23%? Maybe I should use more of that instead of going out and adding in other tools. And I think MSPs would be better served, or technology advisors would be better served, so instead of going out and saying, go buy this new tool, to say, hey, here's a plan to maximize the existing tools that we already have here, right? And that really changes the game. That makes you more of a trusted advisor, which is probably an overused term in our context. But it's something that we need to think about more, instead of overloading people with this is new, this is new, this is new, this is new. It just nothing's new anymore. It's like this repetitive noise that just keeps happening, and it makes it hard. We end up contributing to this deprioritization.
100%. And I think, as we turn the corner towards, I really think, I've been telling everybody, Q4 to me is really going to be a boom quarter for a lot of projects. But as we turn that corner, two-part question, what are 3 things customers should be asking themselves as we get into 2026, Q4 of 25? And what are 3 things that MSPs should be asking their customers?
Yeah, I think for customers should be asking, they should be asking, what challenges can AI solve for me? They should not necessarily be jumping in head first and just spending a bunch of money on an AI tool, but they should really be looking at the challenges. They should also be looking at or asking questions around what can cloud do for me, right? And I know cloud is massive. It's this huge thing. It's an overused marketing term basically at this point. But the cloud can solve.
Well, I named my company after it. Come on, man. You can't say that.
I know, and you did that because the cloud solves challenges, right? That's what it is. Like think about Windows 10 end of life, going back to where we were before. If you're running a cloud virtual desktop right now, you don't have to worry about this Windows 10 end of life thing. You can click a button, you can update to the latest version. There's no extra cost. You can keep running on whatever old janky hardware you've been running on forever. That's a real challenge that you can solve, that you kind of predetermined with your cloud strategy. So those are the types of things people should be thinking about, right? How can this solve these business challenges? I think they should also be asking whoever their technology provider is, what software, what tools are we invested in, and are we maximizing our use of it? Do we actually need these tools? Because I think a lot of businesses with this uncertainty out there are thinking about margins, profits. How can I keep the lights on? Maybe some of them are struggling depending on certain industries that they're in. And if you can lower your costs, that is one way to help maintain your margins, instead of saying I have to let 5 people go, or I have to turn down this business unit, because those are really hard conversations. So really taking a look at that and prioritizing that. I think MSPs should be looking at differentiation, right? They should be asking their software vendors, how can I differentiate myself? Because there are so many MSPs out there that are going to market with the same exact message, and they are not differentiating enough out there. Imagine if you're an MSP and you're listening to this, and you've been going out there meeting with customers about your unlimited support plan, and we do help desk, and we respond to tickets in 30 minutes or less, and we do really, really great security, versus going into that same conversation with an end customer and saying, well, of course we do all that stuff. That's table stakes. Anybody you talk to should be having a help desk and doing security. What we actually do is we take a look at the inventory of the software that you use, and we start with Microsoft 365. And I can almost guarantee right now your MSP is not using Defender. They're not doing things like autopilot for rapid deployments. They're not doing things like protecting PII and things like that. And we actually come in and put in a strategy not to sell you more services, but to maximize the investments that you already have in Microsoft 365. And the reason why we chose Microsoft 365 is because your identity goes through Microsoft, right? And pretty much every customer in the world is centered on Microsoft identity. And that's the keys to the castle, right? That is your username, your password. That's what ultimately protects you at the very tip of the spear. We're going to go and implement Microsoft SSO to every single piece of software that you're using. And if it doesn't support Microsoft SSO, we're going to look at maybe changing that out, right? Those are very different conversations, and you can kind of lead the pack. So when they're evaluating 2 or 3 technology providers, you have a very different message. You're much more likely to win that piece of business and be thought of as this technology advisor, and have this thoughtful approach to IT, because I've done it. I've been the one in there when I was at my MSP. Yeah, we have great help desk. We do security. Go buy, this backup appliance. But, I also kind of sounded like a lot like the competitors. And what happens then? We end up competing on price, right? We don't have that sense of urgency, and we erode our margins, and we can't command that higher price. Talk about cloud. Talk about virtual desktops. Don't go sell a virtual desktop. Talk about the challenges it's going to solve for them. And then before you know it, customers are buying virtual desktops or whatever cloud technology makes sense for them.
Very cool. What do you see on the topic of virtual desktops? What are you seeing as the adoption curve? Where do you think that is in the life cycle, and how quickly are we going to get to sort of mainstream adoption?
Yeah, so it's so funny, right? I'm a virtual desktop guy. Back in like 2012, I was like, "This is the year of VDI," right? And a lot of people like me have been saying that every year since.
Every year since
I'm
12.
not, I'm not saying that this year, but I will say, especially cloud-hosted virtual desktop is continuing to rise, right? That chart is up and to the right for sure. It's maybe not quite as up and to the right as like back in the pandemic when people were like, "Oh man, I need to get all these
I need to get
employees
remote
working from home."
immediately. Yeah,
Yeah, but I also think if you look at just the market, there are millions and millions of terminal servers out there on-prem.
sure.
People that are MSPs that are using SPLA licensing. SPLA is changing. Right? People have end of life on hardware on-prem with terminal services. So we are going to continue to see, I think, massive adoption of that. You look at some of the other like big players. I know they're less in the SMB space, but you look at things like Citrix and VMware Omnissa. They are making massive changes to their programs, and they are really not supporting the SMB community. And so that is driving a lot of people to say, hey, what about this Windows 365 Azure Virtual Desktop thing? And then I also think you're seeing a little bit of a shift of people that have used virtual desktops in the past and have said, do I even need it anymore? I can go, Intune join my machines. I got a couple SaaS apps, that type of thing. And I think those are really like good questions people should be asking. Do I need this? Now, I love virtual desktop. I love that I don't care what happens to my device. I can go anywhere in the world. I can grab
Log in,
literally any
everything's there.
device.
Yeah.
A guy on my team went to do a Tesla test drive, and he actually logged into his Azure Virtual Desktop on that big screen in the front. Like, it's device independent. I don't care where I am. My data's secure. I can always go and work. Now, if that creates other personal problems when, my wife's like, why are you working? You're supposed to be on vacation, those types of things. But I can get my job done. And I think more and more companies are also going towards that. It's less about putting in, your 8 hours a day, and it's more about getting the job done. And I think companies that are thinking about that stuff will really see a lot of advantage with cloud technologies, things like virtual desktops.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Well, I mean, Seth, do you have any other questions for Will?
No, this is great. This was great, Will.
I have one more. Are we Canon or Xerox? What are we?
I mean, I never sold either. If I had to pick one of the two, I would probably pick Xerox, only because when I was selling Konica Minolta, I competed against Canon, and I didn't win a lot of those.
I was a Savin guy. I was a Ricoh guy. Oh, I was Savin, man. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time, Will. This was fantastic. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. With that, I'll send us off. Go Birds.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.